Hello everyone. Today we are looking at the fortune teller of project management, the Monte Carlo simulation. Formally, this is a mathematical technique that uses computer-driven simulations to account for risk in quantitative analysis by running a project model thousands of times to calculate a distribution of possible outcomes. In plain English, this is the project time machine. It allows us to play out our project thousands of times in a computer before we ever spend a single dollar in the real world. I remember a project where the team was 100% sure we would finish in 6 months. But when we ran the Monte Carlo, the computer showed that in 9,000 out of 10,000 virtual lives, we actually finished in 8 months. It was a huge wake-up call. By using this simulation, you stop relying on a single lucky date and start seeing the full range of what could happen. So now that we've mastered the idea that Monte Carlo is our ultimate what-if engine, you might be wondering how we actually feed this machine the right information. Well, that brings us right into our next step, which is inputs and probability distributions. This brings us to input data and probability distributions. The technical books describe these as the statistical ranges like triangular or beta distributions that represent the uncertainty of individual tasks or costs. To put it simply, this is feeding the machine a range, not a point. Stay with me here because you've probably seen this at the office where a manager asks for a precise number. In Monte Carlo, we refuse to give just one number. Instead of saying a task takes 5 days, we tell the computer it takes between 3 and 10 days. Imagine your commute to work. It's not exactly 20 minutes every day, is it? Sometimes it's 15, usually it's 20, but if there's an accident, it's 45. That spread is what we give the computer for every single task in our schedule. By using these distributions, you identify the real-world wiggle room of your project. Now, once we have fed all these ranges into the computer, it's time to let the machine do the heavy lifting, which leads us straight into the world of iterative running. But here is the catch. How do we make sense of all those thousands of different results? That brings us right into our next step, the S-curve and cumulative probability. This brings us to the S-curve and cumulative probability. The book style definition refers to a graphical representation of the cumulative distribution of project outcomes, showing the probability of achieving a specific target or better. To translate that into human speak, it's the confidence chart. It looks like a big lazy letter S. This chart tells you exactly how much gamble is in your plan. For example, it might show that you have a 10% chance of finishing by May, very risky, but an 80% chance of finishing by July. You've probably seen this. If your sponsor demands a 95% confidence level, the S-curve will show you exactly how much extra time or money you need to add to your plan to reach that safe zone. By reading the S-curve, you identify the probability of success. Now, while the S-curve gives us the big picture, we also need to know which specific tasks are the troublemakers dragging our confidence down, which leads us to sensitivity and a tornado within Monte Carlo. Let's look at sensitivity within the simulation. Technically, this is the process of identifying which individual uncertainties have the most significant influence on the overall project outcome by correlating the inputs with the final simulated results. In simple terms, this is finding the anchor. If your project is a boat and you aren't moving, you want to know which anchor is stuck. The Monte Carlo tells you, hey, out of all 500 tasks, this one specific vendor delay is what is pushing your S-curve to the right 90% of the time. I remember a project where we thought our hardware budget was the big risk, but the simulation showed that software integration was the real boss of our schedule. By identifying these high sensitivity areas, you show your stakeholders exactly where to focus their energy. Now, while having this technical insight is a massive win, we have to turn this complex math into a story our sponsor will actually believe, which brings us right into our final step. Finally, we reach the strategic interpretation and stakeholder buy-in. The formal definition is the use of simulation results to establish realistic baselines, set contingency reserves, and manage stakeholder expectations regarding project feasibility. In plain English, this is the reality check conversation. You go to the sponsor and say, "Boss, the math says we only have a 20% chance of hitting your date. To get to an 80% safe zone, we need 2 more weeks. Stay with me here because this is the mark of a pro RMP. You aren't just giving an opinion, you are giving a scientifically backed forecast." It's been a long journey from our time machine to this high discipline system of statistical certainty. This systematic approach ensures that your stakeholder engagement is professional, honest, and builds incredible trust with leadership. So now that we've mastered the introduction to Monte Carlo simulations, well, that brings us right into our next chapter,